I like it quite a bit.
Okay.
Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's fantasy novel Good Omens has finally made its way to the screen via Amazon's new limited series. I'm Zach Laws of Gold Derby, and with me now is David Arnold. He's the composer of all 6 episodes. And David, take us back to the beginning. Were you a fan of the book before you became involved with this new show?
I'm being brutally honest. I never read the book. I was very aware of Neil, obviously, and I'd seen the other film adaptations of his work, but I'd never read the book. The director Doug McKinnon actually sent me an email quite a long time ago saying that he was going up for the job of directing the movie, and if he got it, would I be willing to, to work on it with him? And I said, well, I'd had a great experience with Doug on Sherlock, and I said, yeah, I'd love to, knowing nothing about the book at all. So a few months later, when Doug actually got the gig, he called me up, and I'd still never read it. They sent me the script for the first episode, and it was sort of mind blowing. I mean, it was just an extraordinary thing, and I knew who they'd cast, so I could kind of picture who they were. And I went to the first read through, the script read through, with the cast, which was the first time I actually met Neil Gaiman, and everyone there, David Tennant, who I knew, Michael Sheen, who I knew. Of course, like Michael McKean and like all this amazing Jack Whitehall, people that I sort of known or had known of for such a long time, and it was like a joyous read through this extraordinary script, and they had production design drawings there, they had some props there, they had people from Terry Pratchett's estate there, and the thing felt like you were joining a family. It felt like you were joining a family, people who had sort of grown up and lived with this work for a long time, and had become it had become a big part of people's lives. And what was fascinating to me was that there seems to be sort of a bit of a shared kind of fandom in a way between the sort of Good Omens fans and the Sherlock fans. There's in a way it's an interesting combination of 2 male leads that are somewhat out of kin, out of whack with how we regularly would have like relationships or exist in the world that we live in. And for a lot of people, that was like a very interesting touchstone. The fact that this was a demon and an angel didn't seem to make much difference, but it was a fascinating run through. And once I had it in my head, it felt like the sort of thing that I sort of then needed to do, never mind wanted to do.
So then, what were some of your initial ideas for the music?
Well, we started off very early with there is a scene in the show where David Tennant's Crowley character has to sing a lullaby to the Antichrist. So his job as a demon is to try and get the Antichrist to go to sleep, and he does it by singing him very sweetly a song about when the world's destroyed, he'll be in charge of it, and humanity will be wrought to blood and guts, and the opposite of what you normally would sing to a child in that situation, but. Sort of the way in a way was I spoke to Neil about it, and I said, with this kind of thing, are we talking sort of like Walt Disney, the sort of thing that Mary Poppins sang to the kids, the sort of thing that Dick Van Dyke's character in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang sang to the kids on Hushabye Mountain, like a sort of genuinely sweet innocent thing, but this is the spokesman for Satan singing it. And I thought, well, what if Walt Disney was sort of possessed by Satan? How would that song go? So that was like the first thing. And that became sort of quite a strong thematic idea that I didn't really want to abandon. And so when it came to trying to find the sort of central theme for it, I knew I wanted to keep that element. And in a way, the key to it was in the recording of that little bit, and it's only about 30 seconds, this little lullaby. I had a sort of electric violin solo after the vocal as he's speaking to him and getting him to calm down. And in a way, like a violin is like like the human voice. It's a very sweet, touching sound. But I thought, well, what if that was possessed as well? So underneath that, there is a kind of like a demonic, kind of sort of sludgy, horrible uncomfortable mess underneath it, and that's all led me to the idea that maybe that whenever there is anything nice and sweet in this score, then maybe there should be something alongside it, which is bad and dark and twisted and perverse and evil and funny and wicked, and vice versa. You know, whenever we're in the thoughts of Crowley, that there is an element of good alongside it as well. So, in a way, the thing that became the theme for the show became the theme born of the two characters, even though they don't have one uh, theme each. They kind of share the same thing because, to a greater extent, I think they share similar characteristics.
Was that a difficult balance for you to strike? I mean, with these two kind of disparate tones together?
The great thing about this show, probably the greatest thing that I've experienced on it, was the amount of freedom and support offered to me by Terry, God bless him, Neil and Doug. Um, is that they really didn't say anything about what they wanted in terms of the sound. They were interested in tone and they were interested in emotional storytelling. So they sort of encouraged me to do whatever I wanted. And you've seen the show, and you know it's a show that shoulders a huge amount of a sort of varying approaches. You know, it's not all about one thing. It's sort of about everything. And the fact that we start in the Garden of Eden and we travel through the crucifixion of Christ and the Roman Empire and the French Revolution, World War II, and Six is London and now and the future. And not only does it happen, it's a story that happens in present day the world, but it also is happening in hell and it's also happening in heaven. Um, all these things. You think it's an incredibly broad canvas, but also it has incredibly broad shoulders to sort of support any number of sometimes quite outrageous sort of musical approaches. But the main thing I felt was that I think when you feel you're a part of this world, then the things that you say and the things that you do musically are in themselves part of that world. It might be a different language somehow, but you feel like it's part of the fabric of the world of Good Omens. And of course, before that music had happened, there was no musical world of Good Omens. And after episode one, there was. And I think once we did that, and Neil and Doug felt, I suppose, confident enough to carry on with the approach, then we carried on pushing and trying to do anything. Anytime we said, what would you normally do, we go, let's do the opposite of that. Let's just do what we wouldn't normally do. Let's do what you wouldn't expect. And the show is so strong. I think the writing is so great. The performances, I think, are sublime. That it's a great thing to write for, because it doesn't need music for it to survive. All you can do is hopefully make the experience better. But I mean, even if you stripped all the music away, I think it would still be a great show. And that's a great starting point, knowing that nothing needs to be rescued.
Mhm. You've done quite a fair share of television. You've also done a lot of movies. Most notably, I think you've done like 5 James Bond films.
Yeah.
Is your approach on something like this similar to the way you would do a feature film?
Well, it's interesting with Bond, because with Bond, to a certain extent, I've got to be, when I did my first one, which is in 1997, and I think that was the 17th. Was it the
Mhm.
17th?
Somewhere around
Uh,
there, yeah. You lose
yeah,
count.
yeah, my first. But I was very aware that there were 16 other James Bond scores before. And not only that, but the sound of James Bond had kind of been defined in a way that everyone knew. Everyone knows what James Bond sounds like, the music of James Bond. Now, some people will have a different idea as to what that is, but the general accepted thing is, if you could make a score that sounds like a James Bond score by having certain things in it. So you come into this world of James Bond with me, being very respectful of it, but also loving John Barry from a very early age, wanting to maintain an element of the DNA of what made that music so fabulous. Um, uh, and when I do a show, like Sherlock, for instance. Even though there had been Sherlock music before, there hadn't been a sort of defining Sherlock sound for him for now. And so you originate the blueprint, I suppose, of the sound. And with Good Omens, we had you have a blank canvas, and whenever you're doing the first one of anything, you have a chance of defining it completely. It wasn't really any different when I did Stargate. It was like my first sort of big TV film gig. Was that there was no music for Stargate, until there was music for Stargate, and then the TV show that happened had to reflect the music of Stargate. And I didn't have to do that, but someone had to take that into account. And so when I do Bond, it's like I very much take into account what's happened before, and all the amazing work that John had done. And Good Omens didn't exist before we did it, and now it does. So in a way, it's like writing your own language. It's like writing your own dictionary. These are the words now that I'm going to use, and this is what they mean.
Right. Before I let you go, I mean, you mentioned Sherlock a couple of times, and that was something that brought you an Emmy win and a couple of other nominations. What did that recognition mean for you?
I mean, I actually never went.
Really?
To the Emmys. I remember like when I won a Grammy and not really understanding what it meant till about 10 years afterwards, because for me, my day is my day, and what I do in that day is really important. Because I mean, it's a slightly morbid thought, but at some point, this is going to be the last day of my life. I mean, I hope it's not now.
I hope so too.
It'll be great exclusive. David Arnold drops down dead. But at some point, that will be my last day on this planet, and I kind of wake up in the morning thinking, like, if it's today, I just want to make sure that at the end of the day, I'm going to say, that was a day that I was happy for it to be my last one. And it's a great way of choosing the right things and choosing the right people, and how you spend your time. And where it is obviously lovely to be recognized by people who know what they're talking about, when they sort of give you an award like that. I tell you what, I'm much happier having won one than not having won one. I've not won more than I've won, and it's a much nicer idea. It's the sort of thing, like, if you've never won one of these awards, you think, oh, they don't mean anything. But then when you do, you think, oh, actually they do. I mean, it is a lovely thing. It's a lovely thing to have. But I've still got to take the bins out. And I don't have a gold-plated Cadillac come and pick me up and take me to premieres. It's like nothing changes. I mean, there's a very nice thing that you put on the wall, and it's a really lovely thing to have. And I'm super happy to have had the opportunity to do the kind of work that would be considered for that sort of thing. But I don't think I'd ever work with that in mind. With the idea that this might be the one that gets me that, because like, whatever happens, the time that I've spent working on it is gone. My experience of working on the film has happened. It's never gonna get better. If I've had a great time on a film, I'm not going to have a greater time on that film if I get an award. Likewise, if I don't, it's not going to make that great time seem miserable. So I try and make the most of all the experiences and all the time in a positive way. But I think if ever I got nominated again, maybe I would fly out for the next one. I keep thinking it's a long way to go to lose.
I think that's what Albert Finney said too, actually. So it was.
What was it?
Yeah, it was a long way to travel just to lose, and then to sit during the Oscars for 3 hours without being able to take a smoke or take a drink was sort of unbearable for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's different for him because at least those awards are televised. What do they call them? They call them the ugly awards. It's like
creative arts is what it's their title.
They call them the ugly ones. Yeah, all the people that never get on camera. So at least I don't have to practice a happy losing face. because no one's ever going to see it.
Well, David Arnold, thank you so much for your time, and
Oh,
congratulations on your work.
thank you very much. Thank you.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome. Bye. And thanks to all of you at home for watching. Make sure you click the subscribe button below, and make sure you visit us on goldderby.com for all the latest Emmy news.